Seeing it, Trinidad? You seeing it? Look, the source of all the misery in this country. Look at right there. I see people outside the embassy protesting that Black Lives Matter for George Floyd in America. But they don't come and protest for the 10,000 black people who have been murdered in this country on this party's watch. 58 years of independence, 43 of those were PNM. 58 years of independence, two booms, both booms occurred under the PNM, under Eric Williams and Patrick Manning. $3 trillion spent, nothing to show. We in debt, we broke and broken. Morva, Beetham, Lavantil, Sealots, Patna, River Estate, Bagatelle, Covine, Rich Plain, Factory Road, Mason, La Puerta, Saganga, Abipujad, Big Yard, Hague Street, Point Cumana, Never Dirty, Hardin Place, Cocorit, Waterhole, Gonzales. I could stop right there and I only still in town. And all those places I call are PNM strongholds, die-hard PNM communities where black lives do not matter. Where URP and CPEP dominate the lives of people and they live for a handout, and when they get the pittance in their hand, it ain't worth nothing. They can't get nothing for it. In a country where the value of our dollar is 6.77 to the US dollar, and we have 1/13 the spending power, and no economist from any version of the University of the West Indies could explain to me how that might be so in the third wealthiest nation in the Western Hemisphere. We second, third to Canada and the United States of America. We are ahead of Barbados, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Venezuela, Chile, Paraguay, and all of the rest of them. Barbados have a 2-to-1 exchange. We 13-to-1. $3 trillion in 58 years. Have made some people whose lives really mattered. Abood get $80 million a year to transport prisoners in a jail that thief $1 million between them. That means if we had just let them go, we'd have saved $79 million a year. But no, PNM can't think so because all lives matter. Not so? So let's do the math. If the PNM had put the 3,000 people in remand yard on a $10,000 a month salary just to not commit crime, we'd have saved $50 million a year. Which lives matter? Go see lots this morning. All of you who pulling your hair, rending your garments, calling down the ancestors. This morning, calling out the ancestors because all lives matter. And if you really cared, you'd be outside Balize House this morning. If black lives mattered in this country, this is ground zero for the protests. Because 7,000 of our children fail out of our education system every single year to lives of grotesque dependency and misery, usually ending in homelessness, drug addiction, and premature death. This is a country that has the highest cases of heart disease and diabetes among African males in the Western world because we shifted from our Trinidad Creole diet to facilitate the 1% financiers and the Americanized fast food. And tell me again, which lives matter? This edifice here, Balize House, is the reason the grandchildren of Africa suffer in this country. 90% of all people in remand yard are black. 90% of all the people homeless in this country are black. 90% of the people in jail, black. 90% of the people wanted for violent crimes are black. 90% of the people murdered are black. Now, some of you will be able to go and do your research and come back and tell me, not 90, 81.1 in this, 72.5 in that. But the reality of the situation is the overwhelming majority of all poverty, all desperation, all squalor, all victimization, all untimely death are all black. The people least likely to own a business, own their home, black. Now, how could that be? In a country this wealthy, we spent $3 trillion and have nothing to show. And we have had black faces run this country for 43 of our 58 years. Explain to me how Calderhart and Johnny O and Sampy Wallace and Ish and Steve and all of these jumping jokers could go from not having $5 to hang on a mop to becoming millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires. All our money gone. All of it gone. We in debt. We owe more than we have and can earn. Right now, this government inside of this edifice fighting to loot and steal for their friends and their finances whose lives really matter. To give them give them what's left of TSTT, and to give them NLCB, the big money spinner. Because they want to make sure that after all of them, whose lives matter, who take their family and run to places where their lives will really matter, and leave you here to suffer, because your life don't matter. Remember, when it is time to march, ostensibly when there is nothing left to march for, come here. And all the people who beating up themselves when people say all lives matter in Trinidad and Tobago, that is actually a compliment, not an insult. And if you over-militarize the actual protest, you will end up again silent and alone like Akil Chambers was when he was buggered, raped and murdered. And then people put him in the bottom of a pool. And a predominantly black prosecution and police service couldn't find the two people who buggered and raped and murdered this little 10-year-old child and placed him at the bottom of a pool in a rice importer's house in Highland Park. Trinidad and Tobago did not march for black Christopher Phillip, who crawled around with his pants around his knees, dying on the hospital lawn as an elder in this country. You weren't moved to march for him. You didn't move. You weren't moved to march for Shannon Banfield, whose murderer walks free and she was found dead in a freezer in Iams. Or a Sammy, who they bite off her cheek and leave her under a tree. We didn't march for a Sammy. All lives don't matter in Trinidad and Tobago. And stop pretending that your sudden overnight conversion on the road to Damascus because you see Americans protesting, so you want to join the bandwagon and pretend that you care. Save the hypocrisy and the suddenly zealous piety. Because if you really cared and you wanted to change, you would have joined hands with all of us who have been fighting for black lives to matter in Trinidad and Tobago. Until then, pump your brakes. Because if you're not outside this edifice, ground zero for the sufferation that is the black existence in Trinidad and Tobago, you're fooling nobody.